The summer heat clung to the hills of rural Pennsylvania like a heavy coat, thick and unmoving. Ethan Marshall wiped sweat from his brow as he stepped through the knee-high grass behind his grandparents' forgotten farmhouse. The building had stood for generations, abandoned but not quite dead. It was the kind of place where time felt like it had paused, where secrets could still breathe just beneath the dirt. He wasn't supposed to be back there. The woods past the cornfield were off limits, his grandfather had once warned. But now, with the house left to dust and the warnings nothing more than old echoes, curiosity had its grip on him. Ethan kicked a clump of weeds aside, chasing a rabbit that had darted through a bramble. His foot hit something hard beneath the soil. A dull clang echoed through the stillness. He stumbled, falling to his knees. Brushing away dirt and leaves, he uncovered a piece of rusted metal jutting out from the earth. It was a handle, rectangular, thick, bolted down to something larger buried beneath. He stared at it, heart thudding faster now, not from the fall, but from the unmistakable feeling of discovery. The handle wasn't random junk. It was fixed into something meant to be pulled. He looked around. No one. Grabbing the handle with both hands, he tugged. It didn't budge. He dug at the edges, scraping away more earth. The outline of a metal door began to appear, square and reinforced, a hidden hatch. A thrill shot through his spine, the kind that made you forget about everything else. He didn't open it. Not yet. His mind raced with questions. Why was this here? Who had put it there? And why had no one ever found it before? He took a step back and took a photo with his phone. The sky had darkened just slightly, and the woods seemed quieter now, as if holding their breath. He ran back to the house, pocket buzzing with excitement. His sister Carla was in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone and eating from a jar of peanut butter. "You look like you've seen Bigfoot," she said, raising an eyebrow. "I found something," he said. "Behind the cornfield." She didn't look up. "Let me guess, another fox skull?" "No, it's metal, a hatch or a door buried in the ground." That got her attention. She put the jar down and stood up. "You serious?" Ethan nodded and showed her the photo. Carla stared at it, then at him. Her skeptical face slowly shifted to something more curious. "That's weird. You didn't open it." "I tried. It stuck." "But I think it opens." She grabbed her boots. "Let's go." The two of them returned to the spot just as the sun dipped behind the trees. Shadows stretched long across the grass, and the air had grown cooler. Ethan cleared the last bit of dirt from the edges of the hatch, revealing heavy hinges and a corroded lock mechanism. Carla knelt beside it. "It's old. Like Cold War old." Ethan nodded. "Think we can open it?" "Not without tools. We need something to pry it up." They exchanged a look. Neither said it out loud, but both knew they were going to try. And they would, because whatever lay beneath that rusted door had been hidden for a reason. And now they had found it. Subscribe to the channel if you're hooked already, because what Ethan just found is only the beginning. Ethan's fingers drummed on the toolbox as Carla drove the old pickup down the narrow path behind the barn. They had waited until morning, when the sun was up, and the fear of the unknown had settled into something more manageable. The metal handle in the dirt had haunted Ethan all night. It wasn't just an object anymore, it was a door waiting to be opened. Carla parked in the shade, killed the engine, and hopped out without a word. She grabbed a crowbar and flashlight, then nodded to Ethan. He led the way. The grass was still damp with dew, and the trail they'd trampled the day before was visible in a straight line back to the hatch. When they reached it, the metal glinted dully in the light. Ethan knelt and ran his fingers along the edge again, feeling the chill of it. "Let's see what you're hiding," Carla muttered. She wedged the crowbar under the edge and leaned her weight into it. At first, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of grinding metal, the door creaked upward. A foul gust of air escaped, stale and heavy, like something that hadn't been touched in decades. Ethan stepped back, covering his nose. "God, it smells like death." "Old air," Carla said, coughing. "Or worse." They both stared at the opening. A square shaft descended into darkness, maybe 10 feet deep. A metal ladder was bolted into the wall, descending into the unknown. Dust floated like ash in the beam of Carla's flashlight as she pointed it downward. "There's a floor," she said. "Looks solid. You still want to do this?" Ethan hesitated. A lump formed in his throat. But something pulled at him. Curiosity. Maybe something deeper. "Yeah, I do." Carla exhaled sharply and shook her head. "You're a lunatic." "I'll go first." She grabbed his arm. "No, I'll go. If the ladder breaks, at least I've got more muscle." Ethan didn't argue. He watched as she slowly climbed down, her boots hitting each rung with a metallic clang. She disappeared below, her flashlight beam sweeping across the hidden space. After a moment, "It's clear. Come on." Ethan climbed down, heart hammering. The air got colder the deeper he went, the smell of rust and mold thicker. When his feet touched the concrete floor, he looked around in awe. They stood in a corridor, narrow, reinforced with thick metal walls. Faded yellow paint peeled in long strips, and the air was silent except for the distant sound of dripping water. A flickering emergency light blinked red above a sealed metal door, as if protesting their arrival after so many years of stillness. "This isn't a bunker," Carla whispered. "This is something else." Ethan moved forward slowly. His flashlight landed on a metal plaque beside the door. Most of it was corroded, but a few words remained. "Authorized personnel only and property of U.S. Defense Agency." "I think this is military," Ethan said. "Like Cold War era, maybe earlier." Carla knelt to inspect the door. No lock, but it won't open. "Maybe it's sealed from the other side." They moved further down the corridor, finding more doors, some ajar, some welded shut. One had scratches on it, deep, jagged marks that didn't look like they came from any tool. Ethan reached out, running his hand over the grooves. Something tried to get out. "Or in," Carla muttered. They stood there for a long moment, surrounded by silence. The weight of the place pressed in on them. Time felt suspended, like they had entered a forgotten pocket of the world, untouched by light or life. Carla turned to Ethan, voice low. "We shouldn't be here." "I know." But neither moved to leave, because something deeper than fear was blooming now, something that whispered there were answers down here. And whatever was waiting behind those sealed doors had been buried for a reason, and now it had company. The corridor stretched deeper into the earth, swallowed by shadows. Ethan and Carla moved slowly, their flashlights carving narrow tunnels of light through the darkness. The temperature had dropped noticeably, the air heavier, more oppressive. The silence pressed against their ears. They came to a bend in the hallway, and the structure shifted. Metal walls gave way to reinforced concrete lined with pipes and exposed wiring. The lights above were long dead, but emergency conduits traced faint red lines across the ceiling like veins. Ethan ran his fingers along the wall. Someone built this to last. "No kidding," Carla said, stepping over a fallen beam. "But why?" As they turned the corner, something clicked above them. A brittle hum echoed through the hall. One by one, old fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, casting pale light across the corridor. Some buzzed violently, others popped and went dark again. The sudden brightness made them both flinch. "They still have power," Ethan whispered. "After all these years." Carla narrowed her eyes. "Which means someone's paying the bill, or something's keeping it alive." The hallway led to a large double door, thick steel with warning stripes and a long faded sign, "Research Access, Level 1. Ethan pressed his hand to it. It didn't move. No handles, no locks. Just a black panel with a small keypad and a cracked screen. "It's electronic," Ethan said. "Probably dead." "Let's hope it stays that way," Carla muttered. To the right, a smaller corridor branched off, dimmer and dustier. They followed it, passing rooms with shattered glass windows and overturned furniture. A desk lay crumpled under debris, and papers were scattered across the floor, brittle and yellowed with age. Ethan picked one up carefully. It was covered in numbers, formulas, and strange diagrams. None of it made sense. "What do you think they were doing down here?" he asked. Carla flipped through another binder on a nearby shelf. Whatever it was, they didn't want anyone to find it. At the end of the hall, they reached another door. This one half open, the hinges rusted. They pushed it gently, and it groaned as it swung inward. Inside was a small control room, filled with dusty monitors and broken keyboards. A long-dead radio sat in the corner, covered in cobwebs. But what caught their attention was the wall of photographs, black and white images pinned to a board. Men in uniforms, scientists in lab coats. One picture showed a man standing beside a sealed chamber, holding up a clipboard. His face was blurred, either by motion or age. Ethan stepped closer. One photo had red ink smeared across it. A single word had been scrawled in jagged letters. Forgotten. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Carla turned toward a console. A faded blueprint was taped beside it, an overview of the underground facility. There were multiple levels, each marked with codes: R&D, containment, security. But one stood out. "Look," she said, pointing to the bottom of the map. "There's a section called Echo Wing. It's blocked off." Why would they block off an entire section? She didn't answer. Instead, she folded the blueprint and stuffed it into her backpack. "We need to be careful," she said. "This place isn't just some old bunker. It's a tomb." Ethan was about to reply when his flashlight flickered. For a second, the room darkened. In that instant, he thought he saw movement, just a blur at the edge of the glass. But when the light steadied, nothing was there. His heartbeat quickened. "Let's keep going," he said, forcing calm into his voice. Carla gave him a sideways glance but nodded. They stepped back into the corridor, the weight of the facility pressing in again. Every door they passed now felt like it was watching them, waiting, and the silence had shifted, no longer peaceful, but expectant, as if something had noticed they were there. Back above ground, the sunlight felt artificial after the dim corridors of the underground facility. Ethan sat on the tailgate of the truck, staring at his dirt-streaked hands. Carla paced nearby, chewing her thumb, something she only did when nerves got the better of her. "We need to tell someone," she said finally. "Who?" Ethan asked. "The police? They'll think we broke in somewhere." Carla shook her head. "There's something wrong down there, and we're not equipped for this. We need help." Ethan thought for a moment, then looked toward the tree line. "What about Mr. Briggs?" Carla blinked. "The old guy who lives by the quarry? He was in the army, right? Grandpa used to say he worked in intelligence. Maybe he knows something." Carla looked unsure, but after another moment of silence, she nodded. "Let's try." The Briggs house was just a few miles down a gravel road choked with weeds. It stood alone near the edge of the forest, half swallowed by trees and vines. The porch sagged, and rusted wind chimes creaked in the wind. Ethan knocked once, no answer. He knocked again. Finally, the door creaked open. Walter Briggs stood in the doorway, tall and hunched, with grey stubble and sharp eyes that hadn't dulled despite his age. He looked at them like people do when they've spent too long alone. "You're the Marshall kids," he said. "What are you doing here?" "We found something," Ethan said, "near the old farmhouse." Walter's eyes narrowed. "What kind of something?" "A hatch," Carla said. Buried under the ground, it led to a facility. Walter didn't move, his face didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. The shift was immediate and deep. "Where exactly?" he asked. "Back behind the cornfield, under the ridge." Walter stepped out onto the porch, shut the door behind him. "You opened it?" Ethan hesitated. "Yes." Walter looked away, jaw tight. "You shouldn't have." "What is it?" Carla pressed. "That place, it's military, isn't it?" Walter was quiet for a long moment. Then he motioned toward two rusted chairs on the porch. "Sit down." They obeyed. "I worked in defense logistics," Walter said slowly. "Cold War era. Back then, paranoia was policy. The government built sites, testing grounds, labs, bunkers, buried them deep. Most were decommissioned. Some weren't." Ethan leaned forward. "So what's this one?" Walter looked straight at him. "You found Echo Base." Carla frowned. "Echo?" "It was a classified research station. Biological warfare. They were trying to create soldiers who couldn't die. Immunity, regeneration, adaptation. It started with rats, then it moved on." "People," Ethan said quietly. Walter nodded once. "What happened?" Carla asked. "Something worked, then failed. violently. There was an incident, containment breach. Whole teams disappeared. The place was sealed and erased, the kind of erased where even the paperwork vanished. I only knew because I helped redirect materials before it went black. Ethan felt his skin crawl. Why didn't they destroy it? Because someone always thinks they'll go back, Walter said bitterly. Try again. Finish the work. But the people who tried never came out. Carla stood up. We saw scratches on the doors. Something tried to escape. Walter's eyes darkened. Then it's still in there. A heavy silence fell over them. Even the wind seemed to die. You kids need to stay away from that place, he said. Forget you found it. Tell no one. Nothing in there is worth waking up. But we already opened it, Ethan said. Walter looked at him. Then pray nothing woke up with it. He turned and went inside without another word, shutting the door behind him with a finality that said no more questions would be answered. Carla and Ethan sat in silence. Neither said it aloud, but they both knew the truth. They weren't going to walk away. The blueprint Carla had folded and taken from the control room now lay stretched across Ethan's desk, held down by books and 2 flashlights. The lines were faded, but the structure was clear: multiple levels, passageways, sealed access points. At the bottom, in red ink, was the word Echo 1. They had barely spoken since their visit to Walter Briggs. The warning echoed in their heads, but so did the pull of that place beneath the earth. You sure about this? Carla asked, arms crossed, leaning against the wall. Ethan didn't answer right away. He tapped the keypad code sketched in the upper margin of the blueprint. Walter had this on a photo in his house. Same number we saw at the main vault door. You're saying he knew how to get in the whole time? I think he knew more than he admitted. Carla exhaled. We go in. We find out what this place really is. And we get out. Fast. The morning fog was thick when they returned. The grass was slick and the hatch groaned louder than before when they opened it. Descending into the dark felt different this time. Heavier, more aware. The main corridor still glowed dimly with emergency lights. They followed it, past the open doors and scattered papers, until they reached the sealed vault. The keypad blinked, dead, just as before. Ethan pulled out the blueprint and typed the numbers, 7, 4, 2, 1, 6. Nothing. He frowned, tried again. Still nothing. Carla crouched beside him. Maybe it's not the number, maybe it's the sequence. Ethan studied the keypad. Then he tried a new pattern, using the digits from the blueprint, but reversed and aligned with their positions on a standard keypad. 6, 1, 2, 4, 7. The keypad flashed yellow, then green. A low mechanical whir rumbled through the door. Carla took a step back. That's not good. The vault hissed and unlocked with a heavy clunk. Slowly the doors began to part. Beyond them was blackness, pure, untouched dark. Their flashlights cut through it, revealing a cavernous chamber. Metallic walkways crisscrossed above deep pits, and massive support beams lined the space like a skeleton. Somewhere far below, machinery groaned to life, slow and ancient. This is bigger than I thought, Ethan whispered. Carla led the way, her boots echoing on the catwalks. They passed control panels covered in dust, broken screens hanging from walls. One monitor still blinked, showing a frozen image of a hallway camera feed, static-lined and unmoving. Power's on, she said. But barely. They reached a central hub, a circular control station surrounded by thick glass. Inside, terminals hummed faintly. Ethan stepped in and began scanning the consoles. Most were fried. One had logs, each labeled by date. The most recent one was from decades ago. He clicked it open, lines of text scrolled slowly. Words like mutation, cognitive instability, and stage 4 progression jumped out. The final note was chilling in its simplicity. Containment breached. Door 3 sealed. Subject not recovered. Ethan stared at the screen. Subject? Carla had wandered to a nearby observation window. She wiped away the grime with her sleeve and stared into the adjacent chamber. Rows of storage units lined the far wall, metal pods all sealed. Most were labeled numerically, but one stood apart, its surface scratched with claw marks, The label read Echo 1. She backed away. That's what the wing was named after. Ethan joined her. They built all this for one thing. A faint creak echoed from somewhere in the chamber. They turned toward the sound. It was distant, metallic, like a door settling or something moving. Carla grabbed Ethan's sleeve. "We got what we came for. We need to go." But Ethan was frozen, staring at the scratched pod, because deep in his gut he knew something inside this facility wasn't just a leftover from the past. It was waiting. Ethan didn't move. His eyes were still fixed on the scratched metal pod labeled Echo 1. Carla tugged at his sleeve again, more urgently this time. "We need to go, now." He blinked, stepped back, and followed her without a word. They retraced their steps across the walkway, but instead of heading back to the vault, Ethan paused at a corridor marked with a yellow warning sign, "Access restricted. Classified personnel only." "What are you doing?" Carla asked. "There's another path," Ethan said. The blueprint showed a wing beyond this hall, something labeled X7. Carla hesitated. "You think it's connected to that thing?" "I think it's where they built it." They pushed open the door. Dust blew into their faces as the seal broke. The corridor beyond was darker, untouched. Their flashlights caught peeling paint, broken signs, and more warning labels. "Biohazard, do not enter, isolation required." The air was colder here, and every step felt wrong, like they were crossing into a place the world had meant to forget. The hall opened into a vast chamber, circular and windowless. The floor was lined with cracked tiles and drain grates. Along the walls, dozens of containment pods sat in disrepair, some shattered, others sealed. Inside a few, remnants of things that had once been human pressed against the glass. Ethan's breath caught. They experimented on people? Most of the pods were unmarked, but Carla found one that still had a tag attached. It read, Subject 12B, former Lordy. John Keeler status, irreversible mutation. She looked away. In the center of the chamber stood a large console with a locked drawer. Ethan tried the handle. It stuck, then snapped open. Inside was a journal, worn and leather-bound. Pages were filled with cramped handwriting, formulas, and crude sketches. One image stood out, a diagram of a figure, its muscles distorted, bones reinforced with metal, eyes blackened. The caption read, Echo 1, final prototype, autonomous adaptation, successful. Ethan flipped to the last entry. I begged them to terminate the project, but they refused. They said the subject had passed the final test. No fear, no loyalty, only survival. We've created something worse than a weapon. We've created instinct wrapped in flesh. Carla read over his shoulder. They didn't just want soldiers. They wanted predators. A metallic bang echoed down the hall, distant but unmistakable. They froze. Maybe just pipes, Ethan said, trying to convince himself. But Carla had already drawn the crowbar from her backpack. Let's not be here when whatever it is gets closer. They moved fast now, weaving through the chamber and into another hall. The lights here flickered erratically, casting long shadows. They passed what looked like a surgical bay, tables rusted and covered in cracked restraints. Near the far end, they found a door marked Research Archives. Inside was a cramped room filled with filing cabinets, overturned shelves, and scattered pages. One wall was covered in pinned reports and photographs. Carla flipped through them quickly. Images of subjects before and after experimentation, medical reports, neurological scans. One folder had a tab labeled Echo 1, Incident 17. She opened it. It contained a single sheet. Subject breached holding. 3 staff lost, survived high-dose neurotoxin, regenerated severed limb in 46 minutes. All termination protocols failed. Subject recontained through sedative gas. Recommend decommission. Denied. Carla's fingers trembled. This wasn't just unethical, she said. It was insane. Ethan looked toward the hallway. They thought they could control it. They were wrong. A soft thump came from behind the walls, followed by a low, vibrating hum. It wasn't the facility groaning. It was something alive, something waking up. The humming grew louder, not a mechanical sound but a pulse, rhythmic, low, vibrating through the floor. Ethan and Carla stood frozen in the archive room, the paper in her hand trembling as if responding to the vibration itself. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice. Total darkness. Ethan's flashlight clicked on just in time to catch movement. Something fast, low to the ground, just outside the doorway. A shadow that didn't belong. "Did you see that?" he whispered. Carla didn't answer. She had already stepped back, flashlight up, gripping the crowbar tight in her other hand. A scraping noise echoed down the corridor, like claws on metal. "Back to the main chamber," Ethan hissed. They moved quickly, but not carelessly. The facility felt alive now, as if their presence had triggered more than lights and power. The air buzzed with tension. Every pipe groaned. Every creak was suspect. Halfway to the chamber, something slammed into the wall behind them with terrifying force. They ran. Ethan's boots slipped on the tiles as he rounded the corner, Carla close behind. They dove through the open door into the circular chamber with the containment pods, slamming it shut behind them. Silence. Ethan pressed his ear to the door. No footsteps, no breath. Then a low growl, guttural, not human. The sound chilled him more than any words could. Carla scanned the chamber with her flashlight. "We need another way out." "Back corridor, past the surgical bay," Ethan said. "It leads to the other side of the core." They crossed the room cautiously, weaving between pods and shattered glass. The silence stretched like wire, ready to snap. Then Ethan stopped. Something was missing. He turned toward the back wall. The pod marked Echo 1 was open. The thick metal casing hung ajar, inner restraints broken. Scratch marks scored the inside like something had torn its way out. The foam bedding was shredded, soaked in dark stains. Carla turned slowly and followed his gaze. "Oh no!" Before either of them could react, a scream ripped through the silence. Not human, not animal. Something in between. Raw, primal. The sound came from above. They looked up just in time to see a shape drop from the ceiling. It landed in the center of the chamber, crouched, limbs splayed wide. The flashlight caught it briefly, a blur of sinew, metal, and bone. It had no eyes. Its face was warped, skin fused with armor plating. Tubes pulsed along its spine, and its chest heaved with breath far too deliberate. It didn't move like a man. It didn't breathe like a man. Carla pulled Ethan backward. "Don't run!" The creature tilted its head as if listening. Then it charged. They bolted toward the exit, dodging around pods. The thing crashed into one behind them, shattering glass and steel. The roar was deafening. Ethan pushed open the hallway door, Carla behind him, and they sprinted down the corridor without looking back. They could hear it giving chase. The lights above them exploded one by one as the creature passed. Alarms began to wail, faint at first, then growing. Warnings long dormant, now triggered by the living presence of something never meant to escape. "Left!" Carla shouted. They turned into the surgical wing. Tables and debris flew behind them as the creature closed in. It was faster than it looked. Too fast. At the far end, Ethan spotted a decontamination chamber with a reinforced door. "In there!" They dove through, slamming the door shut just as something struck the other side with bone-cracking force. The metal bent inward, but it held. For now. They collapsed to the floor, gasping. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Carla whispered, "We woke it up." Ethan stared at the dented door. No, I think it was already awake. And now, it knew they were here. The reinforced door held, but the creature's presence still pressed against the edges of their sanity. Ethan could feel it, just beyond the metal, waiting, listening. Carla paced the room, running both hands through her hair. "We can't outrun it. Not in this place, not underground." Ethan nodded slowly. "We need help." There was only one person left who might know what to do. They waited until the thudding stopped. The silence returned like a threat. Carefully, they retraced their steps, through the side corridors, back to the vault. The doors hadn't been disturbed. The hatch to the surface was still open. They didn't speak during the drive. Ethan's hands trembled on the wheel. Walter Briggs opened his door before they knocked. His face was grim, as if he had already known they would return. "You saw it," he said. Ethan nodded. "It's awake." Walter stepped aside and motioned for them to come in. He moved slower than before, as if carrying a weight heavier than time. In the living room, he pulled a metal lockbox from beneath a floorboard. Inside were photographs, documents, a map of the facility, and a recording tape. He placed it gently in an old player and pressed play. Static, then a voice, young, controlled, shaking with forced calm. "Subject Echo 1 has adapted beyond parameters. Temperature, chemicals, pressure. It's learned to survive them all. After Incident 17, sedatives barely last 5 minutes. It's thinking now. Not just reacting, watching, waiting." The tape cut out. Carla sat forward. "You were part of it, weren't you?" Walter didn't deny it. "Not the experiments, logistics, security. I only found out what they were really doing after the lockdown." "You said it was a weapon," Ethan said. "It started that way. But Echo 1 wasn't just built. It was made from a soldier, one who volunteered. They said he'd been injured in combat, and this was the only way to save him. But I think they chose him because he had nothing left. No family, no fear." Carla's voice was low. "What happened to him?" "He changed. Slowly at first, then all at once." Walter set a photo on the table, an old black and white image of a young man in uniform. His name tag read S. Mercer. "That's him, the first and the last." Ethan studied the face. "Is that what we saw?" Walter nodded. "What you saw is what's left of him, or what he became." Carla leaned back, arms crossed. "Why didn't they destroy it? They tried. Fire, acid, pressure chambers. Nothing worked. The only thing that slowed it down was deep sedation and environmental deprivation. That's why they buried the facility. They turned it into a tomb." "Until we opened it," Ethan whispered. Walter looked at him, eyes heavy. "You didn't just open a door, you tore off the lid of something that was sealed for a reason." A silence settled in the room. Then Walter stood and walked to the back of the house. When he returned, he held a thick binder labeled Project Echo, Termination Protocols. He handed it to Carla. "This is everything I have. Some of it incomplete. But there's a weakness. Not in the creature, but in the system that sustains it." Ethan opened the binder and scanned the diagrams. "The power grid?" Walter nodded. "Echo 1 survives because the facility was designed to preserve it. Cut the systems, isolate it, and you might trap it again. Might." Carla looked up. "You're coming with us." Walter didn't flinch. "I'm not letting this happen again." Outside, the sun was beginning to set. Inside, the truth had been laid bare. Echo 1 wasn't just alive. It remembered. The hatch slammed shut behind them with a metallic finality that echoed down the corridor. Ethan spun toward it, yanking at the lever. It didn't budge. Carla joined him, straining. "It's locked." Walter stepped forward, his flashlight sweeping the narrow tunnel. "Not locked, sealed. Something triggered the failsafe." Ethan's voice was tight. "You think it was Echo 1? Walter's silence was answer enough. They were trapped. No way out. No surface access. Just miles of concrete and steel between them and the sky. Carla paced the narrow corridor. "There has to be another exit." Walter opened the binder and flipped through diagrams. "There's one. Maintenance shaft on the opposite side of the core lab. Not part of the main grid. They used it during the original construction." "How far?" Ethan asked. "Deep," Walter said. "And dangerous. But if the creature's loose, it's our only shot." They moved quickly through the familiar corridors, past the archive room and shattered pods, deeper into the belly of the facility. The alarms had stopped, but the silence was worse. Every sound echoed. Every shadow seemed to breathe. At one junction, they paused before entering the next sector. A smear of something dark streaked the wall. The floor was scored with long gashes, claw marks. Carla gripped her crowbar tighter. "It's hunting." Ethan opened the binder again, reviewing the schematics. "If we cut through the filtration hall, we can bypass the core labs and reach the shaft faster." Walter nodded. "Stay close. Don't make noise." The filtration hall was massive. A multi-level room filled with rusted tanks, broken valves, and hanging pipes. Water dripped from the ceiling, echoing like footsteps. They crossed it one by one, careful not to step on loose grates. Halfway through, a pipe overhead groaned and gave way, crashing to the ground with a deafening clang. They froze. Nothing moved. Then a scream, far away, human but twisted, like vocal cords too stretched to sound real. It was followed by silence. Carla whispered, "It's learning our movements." Walter glanced at the lights. Powers fluctuating. It's getting stronger, drawing energy from the systems. They reached the far end of the hall. A security door blocked the way. The control panel sparked, shorted out by age. Walter removed a side panel and started rewiring. Ethan stood guard, flashlight sweeping the dark. Carla checked the binder again. "This shaft, how narrow is it?" "Single file," Walter said, not looking up. "But once inside, it leads straight to the sub-elevator shaft. From there, we can trigger an emergency release and ride the counterweight to the lower access tunnel." Ethan swallowed hard. "That sounds insane," Walter smiled faintly. "It is." The panel clicked. The door slid open halfway before jamming. Carla wedged it the rest of the way with her crowbar. Beyond it was a new corridor, darker than the rest. Pipes burst from the walls like veins. Warning signs lined the ceiling. The air smelled of oil and ozone. They stepped through. A metallic groan echoed from behind. Then a rush of wind. They turned just in time to see something massive blur past the end of the corridor. Carla backed away slowly. "It's circling," Walter motioned forward. "No time. It's toying with us." They moved quickly now, through tunnels that narrowed into steep stairwells, past long-forgotten equipment and shattered lights. Ethan's chest burned from the pace. The map showed they were close. Then they reached it. A steel hatch embedded in the wall, faded writing above it, "Emergency Maintenance Shaft, Level 4 access only." Walter knelt beside it, working the latch. "We go one at a time. I'll take rear." Ethan looked back down the corridor. He thought he saw a shadow move, not fast this time, slow, deliberate, as if it knew they had nowhere else to run. And it was enjoying the wait. The shaft was barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. Sharp metal edges lined the interior, and every movement scraped against the old steel. Ethan led the way, flashlight clenched between his teeth, his breath ragged. Carla followed, then Walter last and silent. After what felt like an eternity of crawling, the tunnel widened. A ladder appeared beneath them, bolted into a vertical shaft. Faint light pulsed from below, flickering like a heartbeat. They descended in silence. At the bottom, the shaft opened into a massive chamber, the core lab. Unlike the rest of the facility, this place was still pristine. No rust, no dust. White tiles gleamed beneath their boots. The hum of machinery filled the space, smooth and steady. Something was keeping it alive. Ethan scanned the room. Rows of cryochambers lined the far wall, each labeled with codenames: Echo 2, Echo 3, Echo 4. Most of them were dark, but one glowed. Carla stepped closer. "This one's active." The glass was fogged from within. As they approached, it cleared. Inside lay a body, humanoid but not fully human. Its skin was stretched taut, pale and veined, covered in synthetic mesh. Tubes fed into its chest. Its eyes were shut, but its fingers twitched against the glass. Ethan whispered, "Is it another Echo?" Walter stared grimly. It never was just one. He moved toward a nearby console and began pressing keys. The screen blinked to life. Logs poured down the display. Experiments, notes, timestamps. Carla read aloud. "Multiple prototypes, all terminated, except Subject 0, Echo 1. Ethan's voice was hollow. "The others failed." Walter nodded. "Echo 1 survived, adapted, but the others were too unstable." Suddenly, the screen shifted. A red banner flashed. "Systems override, remote link established." "What's that?" Carla asked. Walter backed away from the console. "It knows we're here." The cryochamber hissed. The being inside twitched violently. Lights above them dimmed, then turned blood red. Ethan turned toward a second chamber. its door wide open. Inside, a pod was empty. Only dried fluids and torn restraints remained. He read the label, Subject Echo 1. Reassigned containment failed. A recording clicked on. A hollow voice filled the room. Subject Echo 1 exhibits full sensory restoration and environmental control. Neural scans show independent decision-making. Weaponization deemed impractical. Containment recommended indefinitely. A pause. Termination order denied by command. Carla turned to Walter. They knew, and they left it alive. He didn't answer. Instead, he moved toward the power conduit, a large terminal surrounded by thick cables. "This is it," he said. "Core distribution point. We shut this down. Everything dies. Lights, locks, ventilation." Ethan's voice trembled. "What about us?" Walter looked at him. "There's a manual release in the lower bay. You disable this, then run for it. The emergency lift activates when power fails." Carla shook her head. "You're not staying here." "I have to," Walter said. "Someone has to buy you time." Before they could argue, a distant thud echoed from above. Ethan felt the floor vibrate. The creature was coming. Carla grabbed Ethan's wrist. "We have to go." Walter handed Ethan a flashlight and pointed down a corridor lined with red lights. 2 levels down. West exit tunnel. You'll see the lift bay." Ethan hesitated. "You saved us." Walter nodded once. "Go, and tell no one." They ran. Behind them, the lab lights began to fail, one by one. As they reached the stairs, Ethan looked back. Walter was alone in the glow of the core, hands on the console. A single figure, facing what no one else would. The corridor leading from the core lab pulsed with dim red light. Carla and Ethan ran in silence, footsteps echoing like gunshots. The air grew thicker the deeper they went, as if even the walls knew what was coming. They reached the lower level, an engineering subwing littered with broken crates, storage tanks, and abandoned tools. A control panel blinked near the far end, next to a steel gate labeled Emergency Elevator, West Access. Carla ran to the console and scanned the interface. Still locked. Needs power to release. Ethan pulled open a nearby storage bin, coughing as a cloud of dust billowed out. Inside were canisters, sealed chemical agents labeled with hazard symbols and black stenciled codes. He picked one up. "These were used in the initial tests." Carla's eyes narrowed. "Sedatives. More than that, accelerated tissue destabilizers used to break down regenerative cells." She stepped closer. "Think we can use them?" Ethan nodded. "If we rig them into a release system and trigger it when it comes through the core. But someone has to stay behind to detonate it." They both went silent. Walter's face flashed in Ethan's mind, his calm, his choice. "No," Carla said. "We're not letting him do this alone." Ethan opened a maintenance cabinet and pulled out 2 tanks, each fitted with rusted valves and long hoses. "We connect these to the overhead duct system. When triggered, it'll flood the core chamber." "Will it be enough?" Ethan didn't answer. They worked fast. Carla secured the chemicals near a central air intake vent, while Ethan spliced together wiring from a ruined comm terminal. Sweat dripped down his face. The walls seemed to vibrate faintly now, rhythmic, slow. A heartbeat. "It's getting closer," Carla said. Ethan connected the final wire. "Done." She looked at him. "You're sure it'll trigger with the power cut?" He nodded. "The moment the core shuts down, the circuit closes. It'll release everything." Then a roar, deep, monstrous, echoing from above. They froze. Carla stepped to the elevator control panel and punched the release again. Still red, still locked. Ethan grabbed the radio from his backpack, tuned to the frequency Walter had given them. "We're ready," he said. "When you shut it down, the system will activate." Static. Then Walter's voice, calm and steady. "Good, don't wait. As soon as the doors open, you run." Carla held the crowbar tight. "Be careful." Silence. Then a distant rumble, deep and mechanical. The lights overhead flickered. The core was going dark. "Now!" Ethan shouted. The control panel turned green. The gate creaked open. But then came the scream, closer than before, and fast. A blur streaked down the corridor, pipes exploded, sparks flew, Echo 1. It barreled into view, twisting between walls with unnatural grace. Flesh and steel glinted in the dim light. Its face, if it could be called that, was locked in a permanent snarl. Tubes pulsed along its back. Its limbs moved like liquid metal. Carla stood her ground. "Go!" she screamed. Ethan grabbed her arm. "No, together!" They dove through the gate as the creature lunged. The door slammed shut. The lights behind them went out. Then came the explosion. A muffled boom shook the walls. Carla and Ethan stared through the small window in the door. A wave of white mist filled the corridor, and within it, screaming. Not of pain, not even rage. Something else. "Something ending," Ethan whispered. It worked. But neither moved, because deep down they both knew, with Echo 1, nothing ever really ended. The elevator groaned as it descended, the last reserve of emergency power barely holding. Carla and Ethan leaned against the wall, their chests heaving, eyes locked on the floor indicator as it ticked downward. L3, L4, L5. Neither spoke. They were waiting to hear if the screams would stop, but all they heard was silence, and then a sudden jolt. The elevator shuddered violently before screeching to a halt. The lights above flickered and died. "Great," Carla muttered. Ethan forced the door open. A narrow tunnel stretched ahead, sloping upward toward what looked like natural rock. The metal structure ended here, swallowed by bedrock. No alarms, no power, just a dim glow from the emergency beacon flickering in the wall. "This has to be the old mining exit," Ethan said, "the one Walter mentioned." They pushed forward, climbing through jagged stone and decaying support beams. The air grew warmer, thicker with dust. Ethan's legs ached. Every step away from the facility felt like swimming against memory, against the weight of everything they'd seen. Carla stopped suddenly. She turned back. What if he didn't make it? Ethan looked at her. He knew what he was doing. "Yeah," she said softly. "That's what scares me." They climbed for what felt like hours, their breaths ragged, lungs burning. Then finally the air changed, cooler, fresher. Ethan smelled pine, earth, and freedom. A faint breeze touched his face. Then light, real light. They emerged into the woods. The sky was still dark, but dawn crept on the horizon, casting the trees in pale blue. Carla collapsed to the ground, staring up at the sky. Ethan fell beside her. For a long time, they said nothing, just breathing. Just being. Then Carla sat up. "We need to go back." Ethan turned his head. "Back?" "To the farmhouse. Burn it. Bury the hatch. Destroy whatever's left." Ethan nodded slowly. They found an old gas canister in the barn and soaked the entrance to the hatch. The fire caught quickly, flames licking the sky. The wood crackled. The earth hissed. They stood back and watched as smoke curled upward into the morning light. Neither felt relief, only resolve. Hours later, they sat on the farmhouse steps. Carla held Walter's binder in her lap, thumbing through the final pages. Taped to the inside back cover was a photograph. Walter, younger, standing with a group of uniformed men. One of them wore dark goggles, face partially obscured. The name written beneath, S. Mercer, Echo 1. Ethan stared at it. He was just a man once. Carla closed the binder. Not anymore. They didn't speak again until the sun broke the tree line, casting gold across the field. Then, in the distance, a sound. Engines. Government vehicles, black and fast, barreled down the dirt road. Carla's eyes narrowed. Too late. Men in suits stepped out, scanning the area with clinical precision. One of them approached. "You two need to come with us." Ethan met his gaze. "It's gone." The man didn't blink. "You opened something classified. That's never gone." Carla stood slowly. "We buried it." The agent's expression didn't change. "That's what they always think." He motioned for the others to spread out. But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. His fingers reached into his jacket pocket. Walter's journal. He slid it deeper into his backpack, hidden, because even if the place was buried, the truth wasn't. Smoke still curled above the trees where the farmhouse once stood. Nothing but ash and cinders remained. No hatch, no doorway, no trace of what lay beneath. The land had been reclaimed by silence, but it was a silence Ethan no longer trusted. He sat on the porch of a neighbor's home a few miles away, watching the road. Carla was inside, talking to a woman from the state, someone who claimed to be with emergency response, but asked no real questions and took no real notes. Ethan had seen the others, men in unmarked vehicles walking the field, checking soil samples, measuring radiation that wasn't supposed to be there. None of them looked surprised. Carla stepped out and joined him, closing the door behind her. "They're not here for us," she said. Ethan didn't look at her. "No, they're here to make sure no one else finds it." She nodded. "And to make sure we don't talk." He pulled Walter's journal from his backpack. He hadn't shown it to anyone. Inside were handwritten entries, sketches, diagrams, everything the government had buried, page after page of horror, of warnings unheeded. Carla leaned forward, eyes fixed on the edge of the woods. "We did the right thing." "Yeah," Ethan said. "I just don't think it's over." Later that day, the agents returned. One of them handed Ethan a letter, folded and sealed. No signature, just a typed message on plain white paper. "Facility Echo 1 has been classified as a failed containment zone. Do not return. Do not speak, do not search. This is your final notice." Carla burned it in a metal trash barrel without a word. The following week, the land was purchased by a shell company. Fences went up. Surveillance cameras were installed. The old road was blocked by military-grade gates with no markings. Officially, it was environmentally unstable terrain. Privately, it was a new ghost zone. They moved back into town. Carla enrolled in community college. Ethan tried to resume classes, but found himself distracted, always checking the woods, always listening at night. He kept Walter's journal hidden beneath his mattress. Sometimes, when he couldn't sleep, he'd reread the entries, theories about bioweapons, ethics of human modification, notes on regeneration cycles. One line stood out, scribbled hastily in the margin of a medical log. "Echo 1 doesn't fear death because it doesn't recognize it. It survives not from instinct, but from memory. It remembers everything." That thought haunted him. It wasn't just that the creature lived, it remembered, and it had seen them. Carla noticed the change in him. One night she knocked on his door and found him reading by flashlight. "You should let it go," she said softly. "I'm trying." "No, you're not." He looked at her, eyes hollow. "If it ever escapes—" She stepped into the room, sat beside him, and took the journal from his hands. "If it ever escapes," she said, "we won't be the ones to stop it." He didn't argue. Outside, crickets chirped, and a distant train passed through the valley. Life moved forward, but Ethan's mind stayed underground. He began drawing maps again, tracing the facility's layout from memory, annotating weak points, vent systems, alternate routes. He didn't know why, only that he had to, because something deep inside told him this wasn't over. Not yet. Life in town took on a pattern. School, chores, silent dinners. Carla adapted, immersing herself in classes and part-time jobs, burying the summer's secrets under layers of routine. But for Ethan, normality was a mask that slipped more each day. He found himself haunted by dreams, the grinding hiss of old metal doors, red emergency lights flickering on the edge of darkness, the echo of claws against concrete. Most nights, he woke before dawn, heart pounding, half expecting to see the pale silhouette of Echo 1 standing at the end of his bed. He didn't tell Carla about the dreams. He didn't mention the whispers he sometimes thought he heard in the wind, or the way the woods at the edge of town seemed to breathe at night. But the signs were there. In his room, maps and sketches multiplied, tacked above his desk and hidden beneath textbooks. He drew the facility's layout again and again, tracing possible escape routes, cataloging every detail he could remember. He didn't know if it was obsession or preparation, only that it felt necessary. One evening, while Carla was out, Ethan sat on his bed flipping through Walter's journal. A loose page fell out, one he hadn't noticed before. On one side, a hand-drawn diagram of the vault's security system. On the other, a single sentence in Walter's shaky script: Echo 1 was never alone. Ethan stared at the words, heart thudding. He remembered the cryo chambers in the core lab, the one that was open, the others, dark and cold, the logs that hinted at multiple prototypes. If Echo 1 had survived, what about the others? Was something else left in the dark? The questions burrowed into his mind, feeding his anxiety. He tried to push them away, but the silence in the house grew heavier, pressing in from all sides. Days blurred into weeks. Carla noticed his restlessness. "You're not sleeping," she said one morning, her tone gentle but firm. "I'm fine." "No, you're not. You haven't been since everything." Ethan hesitated. "Do you ever think about going back?" Carla shook her head. "Never. That place is gone. Whatever was there, it's over." But Ethan couldn't make himself believe it. One night, when a thunderstorm swept through town, he heard something beneath the rumble of rain. A faint rhythmic scratching. It sounded like it was coming from under the floorboards, from deep underground. He pressed his ear to the ground and listened. There it was again, a soft, deliberate scrape. He tried to convince himself it was his imagination, nerves worn raw by sleepless nights. But the sound persisted, steady and patient. The next morning, Ethan walked to the edge of the woods, following the old trail that once led to the farmhouse. All that remained were charred timbers and scorched earth. But the land felt different, restless, unfinished. He stood there for a long time, listening to the silence. He opened Walter's journal, flipping to the last page. Beneath the faded ink, he saw one more line, scrawled at the very bottom: "If you find this, don't trust the quiet. Echo 1 was never alone." The warning settled into his bones, cold and certain. He turned to leave. But as he walked away, the wind shifted, carrying with it a scent that was not rain or pine or earth, but something sharp, metallic. He didn't look back, but he knew. The story wasn't over. Not for him. Not for anyone. The world felt quieter after that summer, as if the land itself had paused to breathe, waiting for a story to truly end. Weeks turned into months. School resumed, the days grew colder, and autumn leaves blanketed the old trails that once led to disaster. Ethan tried to let it all fade. He told himself there was nothing left to fear. No more secrets, no more hidden hatches. But fear doesn't simply disappear. It burrows deeper, shaping the edges of everything that comes after. He busied himself with classes, homework, even joined the school's robotics club. Carla seemed lighter too, almost normal again. For a while, life pretended to be ordinary, but the dreams never fully faded. One late afternoon, Ethan returned to the edge of the woods, drawn by a pull he couldn't name. The ground where the farmhouse once stood had grown wild again, tall grass and brambles covering every trace of fire and ash. Sunlight slanted through the trees, warming the earth. He took a slow breath, feeling the wind on his face, and started to turn back. That's when he saw it. Half hidden in the grass, not far from where the original hatch had been, something metallic caught the light, a faint, dull glint beneath the weeds. He knelt, pushing aside the tangle of roots and leaves. His hand closed around a handle, rusted, thick, impossibly familiar. His heart hammered in his chest. Ethan froze, every muscle tensed. For a moment, the world shrank to a single point. The cold bite of metal in his hand, the silence pressing on his ears. He knew, without understanding how, that this was not the same hatch, not the one he'd found months ago. This was new, or maybe old. A memory flashed in his mind. The warning in Walter's journal, the empty cryo chambers, the line that haunted him. Echo 1 was never alone. He felt the ground beneath him vibrate ever so slightly, as if something far below had noticed his presence. He let go of the handle and slowly backed away. He forced himself to walk, then run, branches tearing at his clothes, lungs burning. He didn't stop until he reached the safety of home, That night he sat at his desk, staring at the journal's final page. He tried to write something, anything, to process what he'd seen, but no words came. He only knew that whatever lay buried out there was not finished with him, or with the world. Ethan closed the journal, looked out his window at the shadowed trees, and made a silent promise. If the past ever tried to surface again, he would be ready. Because some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. Thank you for following this story to the end. If you've made it this far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps us bring more mysteries to light. And if you're hungry for more, click on the next video appearing on your screen now to keep the adventure going. There's always another secret waiting to be uncovered. Stay curious, stay brave. And remember, some mysteries are better left buried.